I think we probably have 1 minute to go, but I'm one that likes to start on time and maybe finish on time. First of all, I would like to read, guess what? The fire code. That's exactly right. In the event that a fire alarm sounds, please remain seated in the auditorium until directed by a Springmore staff member, who all of you know most of them, on when and how to exit. Please exit in an orderly fashion. Do not use the elevator, and once outside, go to the... You got it. And one of these days, we'll find out where the red pole from here is. I'm determined to find that out. Thank you, guys. I would like to call this meeting to order of the Springmore Resident Association for 2026. It's great to see all of you. Appreciate so much you coming out. And I hope that there are also numbers of residents watching on TV 1341. Thanks to Carrie for operating our camera today. A recording will also be on the Residents Portal within about 48 hours. The Residents Association meeting for 2025 will be on the portal as well. So you will have almost 2 years there to look back and see if you remember something that you'd like to see. First of all, I'd like to ask, is there any new member here that this is your first meeting to come to, or new residents? Okay, we have somebody coming up. John Rogers is going to come and bring you a microphone. If you'll stand up and tell us your room number, how long you've been here, and from where you came. Tell your name, yes, thank you.
Can you hear me? No? Yes?
Put it right, yes.
Now can everybody hear? Okay. Jan and Neil Lapp, we've been in Raleigh 58 years, so we are not coming from afar. We have been here 6 weeks. I'm a retired teacher. He is a retired plant pathologist.
How wonderful. At North Carolina State?
He got a PhD at NC State.
Very good. Someone else? Where do you live here, Ms. Lapp?
You can tell them. Just South Village.
All right. Is there anyone else? We welcome you. What? Somebody else raised their hand, they said. On the first row? Oh, right here, okay.
Hello, I'm Chris Schoenwalder. I've been here 3 weeks, and I moved here from Northwest Raleigh. I've lived in North Carolina 45 years, but I'm originally from New York City.
Welcome, and thank you for being here today. You know that every resident that here is a member of the Residents Association. I would like to ask at this time if there's anyone in the auditorium who is a 2026 committee chair. If you would, please stand. The committee chair, or raise your hand. Or if you are a member of one of the Residents Association committees, thank all of you for doing the things that you do. And now I'm going to introduce the executive committee. I'm Barbara Smith, president. And if you all would stand, this is, if you can. This is Dave Gospodarik, he's vice president. Peg Simone, secretary. Lou Martin, Director, Charlene Young, Director, Neil McLeod, Director, and John Rogers, Director. And they're good, but there's one more. Mr. Jim Bundy, who is past president, and I want to thank him for his year of service. He's wonderful. He's a good mentor. And thank you, Jim. And thank all of you and all of the rest of you. Right now, I would like to ask Carrie Ritchie to come forward. She has something she would like to update for you. She is the Wellness Director.
Thank you. In your mailbox today, if you haven't already checked, you have a weekly flyer, and on the back of it, depending on which side you look at first, there is a whole side about the upcoming election. Now, because we are not a polling site any longer, we're trying to provide you as much assistance as possible, so we'll have more information about transportation. But before the March 3rd election, we will have 2 events. It's called a multi-partisan assistance team. That's from the Wake County Board of Elections. So if you have questions about your voter registration, change of address, absentee ballot, anything related to the election, they provide these trained multi-partisan team members to come out and help. So it's on this flyer, January 21st and February 5th in the Great Room from 2 to 4. They do ask that you sign up so I can tell them how many people to prepare for so they can have enough people to help you out. So please take a look at that. If you need any assistance whatsoever or have questions, just sign up so you can come and have those answered before the election. And from the Health and Fitness Committee, just a reminder that the second semester school supply drive is going on through next Friday, January 16th. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, very much. The executive committee that you just met acts as a sounding board to the Springmore management team. And the head of that team is Mr. Brad Dilday. He's the executive director. And right now, I'm going to ask him to come forward and talk to you for a minute. He has something he'd like to say that I think is kind of special.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Thank you all. And actually, you see me and hear from me quite a bit. So I invited a few friends that had a message we want to share with you today. Hey, keep coming, keep coming, keep coming, keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. You go all the way across. Keep going. Y'all keep going. Even Martin showed up. You can fill in that way too if you want to. Big on it. They're on it. Yeah. Oh, good. I bet that was fun. You can go that way too. You can fill in there. Yeah. Manny. Hey, Laura. That's wonderful. All right. Hey, while I appreciate I appreciate your applause for them, but the reason they're here is they want to say thank you to you for your generosity and the willingness for their gift. So thank you all. All right, yeah, we just want thank you so much. I know that you give out the checks and everything during the with the employee appreciation gift, but not everyone has a chance to come by, and you don't get to see everyone. So they're here. Thank you all for all that you all do for us. As much as we can do for you, we appreciate what you do for us. So thank you, and y'all can go back to work now.
Hey, Helen. That was great. Thank you. Thank you, Brad, and all the helpers that are here. They're wonderful in every department. Thank you. Now I would like to call on Dr. Joanne Wooten, Chair of the Management Advisory Committee, to the podium for an explanation of the memo that you received last week concerning questions and comments to be sent to the Management Advisory Committee. I call it the MAC Committee. So that they might be addressed at the semi-annual RAM meeting in March. So, Dr. Wooten. She lit.
I think you can hear me now. Well, first of all, I think she just about covered all the major points. But I am here to remind you that this memo was sent to you and was in your mailboxes last Thursday. So if you haven't checked your mail recently, you might want to do that. This is an invitation from us to submit non-budgetary questions of general interest to be answered by Springmore Management and Board of Directors. These questions will be answered at the meeting on Monday, March 9th, our regular March meeting. And so we encourage you, we want to really encourage you. We're counting on you sending us the questions. That's the program. So please send us your questions and or comments regarding non-budgetary matters. And anything that is of interest to residents at Springmore can then be addressed by the management of Springmore and the board, including the Board of Directors. The most important thing I have to say is February 2nd is the deadline. So if you want to submit something, go ahead and do it, because otherwise you might forget till too late. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wooten. Brad Dilday and Brandon Hare and David Ammons are scheduled to be at the March meeting to address your concerns and questions. And of course, the budget-related items will be addressed in September. So be sure to get those questions in. Now it's time for this month's program, which really sounds interesting. I'm going to turn this over to the Vice President, Dave Gospodarik.
Thank you, Barbara. First of all, welcome to 2026. And I'd like to apologize for the lack of refreshments today. Apparently, they ran out of molasses. But it was my error. We'll let Joe be our refreshment today. Joe Gosselin is our speaker today. Joe is a resident in the Valley Building, in fact, right next door to me. And he moved in January of 2024. Joe was born in June of 1946 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He graduated from Malden Catholic High School in 1964 and from Boston College in 1968 with a BS in physics. Joe worked as a software engineer for IBM in Poughkeepsie from 1968 through 1993, and then he worked at SAS here in Cary from 1994 to 2013, and that's when Joe retired in 2013. He's a former member of the United States Tennis Association, the Eastern Tennis Umpires Association, and the American Pool Players Association. And Joe, of course, chairs the pool group here at Springmore. He served as a linesman at the U.S. Open tennis tournament from 1988 through 1992. And if you all haven't seen his video from his portal, he was hit by a serve by Andre Agassi. It was very well documented and has gotten lots of views online. As I said, Joe is a resident of the Valley Building. And let me introduce Joe Goslin.
Thank you, Dave. Let me see if we can get this thing off the ground. Test that first. Okay. The Great Boston Molasses Flood is a real event that occurred in Boston on January 15, 1919. 21 people were killed, 150 injured. This lecture is derived from a longer one that I gave at NC State Ollie back in 2022. It is built primarily, its primary source was this book, Dark Tide, The Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919 by Stephen Palaio, which came out, I think, in 2003. Now, I would like to ask you folks to withhold your questions until after I'm finished, because we have a lot to go through. Besides the Palaio book was another book written by Deborah Copps aimed more at young people, and incidentally, 4 children's books. And note that all the heroes are ladies or girls. So begins a great science fiction story, science nonfiction story. This story is true. It lasted for 10 years. So along to borrowing from George Lucas, a long time ago in a city far, far away. This story was told to me by my father when I was 9 years old, and he and I were walking in a place in Boston called the Charles River Dam. It's not too far from the TD Garden. He may have seen it in the August 1955 Reader's Digest. He told me about the tank exploding and killing all those people and horses and other animals. And he said that some days you could go into the north end. Can you all folks hear me, by the way? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. He said that you could still smell molasses in Boston in that north end section. I was skeptical. And then a few years later, I was in the North End on an errand, and it was a warm, sunny day in late May. I'm walking down the street. What do I smell? Molasses. This is the aftermath, one of the photos, there'll be more, the aftermath of the disaster. And through this walked a Boston municipal court judge named Wilford Bolster. When Wilford was done, this quote appeared in the papers. The chief blame rests upon the public itself. This single accident has cost more in material damage alone than all the supposed economics in the building department. Laws are cheap of passage, costly of enforcement. They do not execute themselves. A public which, with one eye on the tax rate, provides itself with an administrative equipment 50% qualified, has no right to complain that it does not get 100% product. And so far as it accepts political influence as the equivalent of scientific positions, which demands such attainment in a high degree, so long it must expect breakdowns in its machinery. You could transfer that quote 100 years into the future from 1919. Okay, all right. Judge Bolster was to conduct a criminal inquest into the disaster. He visited the site and tromped through the records. He was angry. Someone was going to pay. And this quote appeared in the newspaper. So, a little history first. Why molasses? This is the triangle trade, which became, according to Palaio, which became the backbone of New England's pre-revolutionary economy. The uses of molasses, the sugar substitute, baking, considered a vital part of the colonist diet, but more important for our story, alcohol. Okay? Rubbing alcohol, drinking alcohol. The molasses that was shipped up to Boston was called blackstrap molasses. It had gone through 3 boilings down in the Caribbean and was shipped up to Boston. But the most important use of molasses or alcohol was munitions. In 1915, World War I was raging. Britain and France needed munitions. American companies supplied both alcohol and munitions to the European and American munitions manufacturers. Alcohol is used in the production of munitions. Ethanol was used in the production of cordite, which was a preferred explosive. So the United States Industrial Alcohol Company decided to get into the alcohol business, or at least increase its alcohol output. A subsidiary was Purity Distilling Company. Its treasurer was a man named Arthur P. Gell, and he was charged with building the tank. He had no engineering background. William White was the tank supervisor in charge of security, and et cetera, and a man named Isaac Gonzalez was the tank operations manager. Building the tank. Gell's marching orders from USIA President Frederick M. Harrison in the late 1914, the war at this point is about 4 months old, build the tank and have it ready to receive cargo by December 31st, 1915, and the first cargo was 700,000 gallons of molasses from Cuba. So where in Boston to build a tank? It was a place called the North End. So now we get a little geography. This is Boston in 1921, 2 years after the disaster. Take the microphone with you. Okay, thank you, John.
Thank you.
The molasses tank was right here. The house where I grew up was right here. This distance from here to here is about 3 miles. When the molasses at this point was shipped to a distillery which is in Cambridge, which was right here. Now, as you can see from this map, this is old Boston. There's no Logan Airport. Arthur Gell finds the perfect location. After months of haggling with the Boston Elevated Railway, he signs a 20-year lease for a 17,000 square foot parcel at 539 Commercial Street, $5,000 a year starting November 1st, 1915. Boston at this time had a population of about 750,000 people. The North End had about 30,000. Now, right here is the word commercial for Commercial Street. This is a contemporary map. This is where the tank was located, right at this bend in Commercial Street here. Now, what about the Old North End? The Old North End had gone through several iterations of population. The Jews came, the Irish came, and then the Italians came, and these subsequent peoples had moved out over time higher up on the scale. The North End essentially was a ghetto, okay? As you can see from these tenements, and this lasted for quite a while, well up into the 60s. The Italian majority reached its apex in 1930 and has been declining since. The North End housed about 30,000 people. 28,000 were of Italian descent or immigrants themselves. Many were from southern Italy and were illiterate. They lived in a half-mile square area, dense like Calcutta. They were an insular community with no political power at all. This is a detailed map of the site at the time. Here's the tank down here. This is an elevated commuter railway that runs between Boston's north and south stations, railroad stations. Here's a fire station, Boston paving yard, blacksmith office, a playground here, the Clarity House, there were residents who died, and ships would come in here at Boston Harbor and unload. So Gell has got to build this tank, and he's got to get it done fast. So he contracts with the Yunnan company to build a 3-foot thick slab for the tank to sit on. Yunnan obtains a permit from the Boston Building Department for a quote-unquote receptacle, not a building. Gell contracts with Hammond Iron Works to build the tank. When Hammond asks about permits, Gell tells them, build it under Yunan's permit. Yunnan built the slab in November 1915. Hammond builds the tank in December. They tested the tank with 6 inches of water. They just wanted to see if it would leak around the base. 13 feet of molasses are pumped into the tank for the first shipment, 700,000 gallons. Here's the finished tank. The picture on the left, you're looking west on Commercial Street, and the picture on the right, you're looking south along the railroad tracks going towards South Station. The construction details, 7 rows steel plates, 18 plates per row. The width of the plates varied from about 2/3 of an inch at the bottom, not a lot, to 1/3 of an inch at the top. All seams were riveted. There was no welding. Horizontal seams were lapped. Vertical seams of the bottom were double butt joints, as you can see at the top. The remaining vertical seams were lap joints, and the bottom was connected to the cement slab by angle irons. the tank dimensions and capacity. This is rather stunning. The tank was 50 feet high, 90 feet in diameter. Its volume was 319,950 cubic feet. Capacity, 2.3 million gallons. 9,000, almost 10,000 tons of water, almost 14,000 tons of molasses. Isaac Gonzalez was the operations general man. He pumped molasses from the ships into the tank via a 220-foot underground tunnel. The tank would offload molasses into smaller holding tanks. From there, it would be pumped into rail tank cars and transported about a mile to a distillery in East Cambridge that I pointed out before. 20% was turned into grain alcohol for rum, etc. 80% was turned into ethanol, which was used to manufacture munitions by the likes of DuPont, Hercules Powder, Etna Explosives, or sold directly to the governments of France and Canada and Britain. Things were going great. U.S. industrial alcohol was raking in the loot. But the tank was not without its troubles. Isaac's nightmares, groans and gurgles from the tanks. He showed flecks of steel from the tank's interior that had broken off because of the stress. He repeated his warnings to Jell-O White, and he bled off molasses into the harbor to relieve the strain. He quit in September 1918 and joined the Army, and Mr. White took over. Isaac Gonzalez was frequently up at night in his house having nightmares. A lot of the time he spent at the tank. His wife didn't like that. And there were other things going on that I got into more in the other lecture, but let's say that this was the era of the Red Scare. Okay. So we start to load up potential energy. Potential energy is the ability to do work. Okay. In January 1919, the SS Malero sails from Matanzas, Cuba, a seaport about 50 miles east of Havana. It has 1.3 million gallons of molasses aboard. On January 12th through 13th, 600,000 warm molasses gallons are pumped from the Malero into the tank. It's now at capacity for the 8th and last time. 2.3 million gallons, 13,000 tons. The Malero, when it was empty, weighed 5,500 tons. So the molasses in the tank was now 2.5 times the weight of the ship. The potential energy of molasses in the tank was roughly 850 million joules. A joule is a measure of energy. A stick of dynamite contains approximately 1 million joules. A joule is the energy needed to lift a medium-sized tomato about 3 feet. The molasses was mainly at this point to be used for grain alcohol because Prohibition was right around the corner. And they wanted to cash in. The war was over. Armistice had been signed. But they wanted to cash in one more time with the alcohol. In fact, the 18th Amendment was ratified the day after the collapse. When warm and cold molasses meet, mixing began, caused some fermentation, releasing gas in the tank, increasing the pressure. The tank had a vent at its top, and the vent was closed. Why? It was January. It wasn't gonna heat up in January. Oh, and a little tidbit I found out later, the SS Malero, a year and a week later, sank 150 miles off Savannah. They had 2 lifeboats, and they divided the passengers, including the captain and the family, and some of the crew into one boat, and all crew in the other boat. the captain's family in that lifeboat, they were found. The other boat was never found. But they were hauling molasses to Philadelphia when they went down. A river sweet and deadly, Wednesday, January 15th, 1919, at 12:30 p.m. Let me see if I can get this thing to go. Whoops. Is Charles here?
Is it just a link in there? You click right there. Hold on. I'll get it in.
No, there's no link.
It's a just plays on there. Yeah, I'm not sure. If it's not a link, you'd have to copy and paste it in there.
Okay, I think I'm going to end the slideshow. I'll come back to it. Let's see, we're at slide number 27. There we go. Bear with me, folks. Can anyone see a mouse up there? A pointer? Yeah.
I'm trying to just play it.
I just want to get a mouse so I can start that video.
You don't have it up here.
It's right there on the Chrome.
You can't see it on your screen.
Okay.
Play a video.
Okay. There we go. I can't see the mouse up there.
Yeah, let me just. There we go.
How did you get the mouse to come on?
I just found it here and then moved it that way. You ready?
That vent was closed, trapping that pressure inside the tank. It was around 12:30 when it started. Witnesses and survivors say that they suddenly noticed a rat-a-tat-tat noise that sounded like a machine gun, followed by a slow rumble that was felt for blocks. The noise was caused by the rivets blowing out of the tank as it seemed to disintegrate, falling down upon itself and releasing the built-up energy of 2.3 million gallons of molasses, and sending a 25-foot wave traveling 35 miles per hour into the streets, spreading in all directions. Patrolman Frank McManus, on a routine patrol along Commercial Street, happened to be about 100 feet from the tank when it went. He said, "I felt some wet, sticky substance strike me about the shoulders, first thinking it was mud, and then he saw the tank fall. He was able to escape the wave by dashing up a side street and called for backup. Send all available rescue vehicles and personnel, immediately." H.M. Dorley, a Boston and Worcester Street Railway Company freight agent, heard the rumble and felt his building shake and instinctively knew what it was. "The molasses tank is gone," he cried. Words that were barely out of his mouth when the wave hit his office, trapping Dorley and his co-workers inside for hours as the molasses swept past. Dorley was quoted in the Boston Post. "The broken parts of the tank missed our shed by only a matter of inches. If they had struck it, well, I wouldn't be talking with you. Parts of the tank struck other houses, and they crumpled like eggs. How we escaped, I am at a loss to explain. Little short of a miracle."
What if you could clean your retainer at the touch of a button? No more brushing or tablets. Over 4 years ago, our team of engineers knew there had to be a quicker, easier, and more effective way to deep clean oral appliances.
Others weren't as lucky. In the nearby Engine 13 firehouse, located behind the molasses tank, firefighters Bill Connor, Fred McDermott, Nat Bowering, and Patty Driscoll were playing cards on their lunch, while colleague George Lahey and friend John Berry watched. The rescue workers had little time to react as Bill Connor, who had been facing the window, saw the wave rushing towards the building, alerting his friends. Patty Driscoll was able to escape the building before the wall of molasses struck the building and lifted Engine 13 firehouse off its foundation, sending it towards Boston Harbor, trapping the remaining men inside. The others struggled to stay afloat in the sticky substance, where they remained trapped for hours. By the time rescue workers had discovered them and fought to reach them through the wreckage of the building, George Lahey finally succumbed and drowned in the thick fluid. The others survived. Bridget Clarity, who had been outside doing household chores, felt a rumble and sudden rush of air as the tank collapsed. The 25-foot wave ripped through her house, picking her up and carrying her across Commercial Street, where remains of her home fell upon her. Her son, Martin Clarity, a well-known amateur boxer in the area, was home asleep when the wave struck the house. He awoke on his mattress, covered in debris, afloat in a sea of molasses, and was able to find and rescue his brother and sister. He was not able to find his mother, and later learned that she had died before rescue workers could reach her. The wave struck the trestle of the nearby elevated railway, causing it to collapse. Royal Albert Lehman, brakeman for the elevated railway, saw the wave and, through what could only be called sheer luck, managed to pass over the damaged section and come to a stop, knowing that this was a busy length of track and that a train from North and South Station were just minutes behind his. He ran to a nearby guard shack and told the railway worker on duty to stop the trains. Scrambling onto the trestle, he raised his arms frantically, screaming, "Stop! The track is down!" and was able to get the attention of the oncoming engineer, who stopped the train just in time. After the initial wave, rescue efforts sprang into gear. The USS Nantucket, a gunboat and training ship for midshipmen, was berthed nearby. Lieutenant Commander Howard G. Copeland had heard the rumble and seen the tank collapse. He immediately issued a call to quarters, and 116 sailors from the USS Nantucket rushed to the rescue. They posted guards to keep bystanders away and started wading through the knee-deep molasses, digging through the rubble for survivors. By the time the Boston police arrived, the sailors had pulled more than 20 wounded from the wreckage. Police, firemen, Red Cross workers, and civilians all rushed to help, but the effort was difficult. The molasses was so thick and covered everything entirely that it was extremely hard to spot survivors or even identify them. Horses were trapped in the mire, struggling to escape, leaving the police no choice but to kill them. A relief station was set up in Haymarket Square to receive the injured, and according to the Boston Globe, by 1 p.m., only a half hour after the collapse, an estimated 100 to 150 people had been taken from the wrecked area, with still untold more who needed help. In the end, nearly 150 people were injured, and 21 were killed, crushed or drowned in the molasses. The cleanup took weeks, and well over 300 people volunteered. Crews used pressurized seawater from fireboats to wash the molasses residue from the streets and sand to absorb the excess. Recovery efforts took just as long, and many of the dead weren't recovered until weeks later. Cleanup eventually took about 87,000 man-hours. The fire departments had to pump thousands of gallons of molasses from the cellars, and the hardened remains of the substance needed to be removed with chisels, saws, and brooms. People wanted answers, so an investigation was launched, and a month later, in February, the chief judge of Boston Municipal Court, Wilfred Bolster, made public the results.
We're done.
There was evidence that indicated the tank was wholly insufficient in point of structural strength to handle its load, and held USIA to be guilty of manslaughter. 120 different lawsuits involving victims, thousands of gallons of molasses from the cellars, and the hardened
That's it. There you go.
Okay, let me see if I can get back to the pitch. Okay, a couple of notes. It was 40 degrees and sunny, and that was a blessing, and it was a blessing at the time it occurred about 12:30 during lunch hour. Many of the workers, in fact, most of them weren't there. They were out having lunch, including William White, who I mentioned earlier. His not being there probably saved his life. Not only did you have molasses coming at you, you had steel plates with sharp edges, some of them weighing 10 tons. But it could have been worse. If it had been the summertime, the adjacent park that I showed you on the photograph could have been full of children. Now we have to move along. Okay, some more pictures. Let's see. That's Commercial Street looking west. The right is the tank roof. A railway car that killed a 10-year-old boy in the train trestle. Molasses on the buildings on Commercial Street. This is an important photo, okay? I want you to notice something. See these windows here? You see the molasses that's up on the building? These windows are intact. That will become important. And here are the headlines, and there's a couple of interesting items in here. Let's see, as I said before, it was the time of the Red Scare, and there were Italian anarchists in the North End and in Boston, in fact, all the way out to Chicago. And if you want, you could buy explosion insurance down here. And then up here is an article about the ratification of the amendment prohibition. Oh. There are 3 children. Interesting, the one on the bottom survived by hanging onto a lamppost, and he lived to be 86 years old. Here's where 11 died, the immediate 11 at the site of the accident. The red dots are the approximate locations of the people. And down here, whoops, wrong button. Down here is where the 2 children and somebody chasing them. That's where they died. All the injured were taken to the Haymarket Relief Station. That was mentioned in the video. Some of the people were trussed up on wooden frames covered in molasses. It was a scene out of Dante. So the cleanup begins. And here comes the judge. Going back to the dead, they ranged in age from 10 to 78. There were a couple of young Teamsters, 17 and 18. The oldest was a messenger. One was a firefighter. 4 were neighborhood residents, and the rest were a variety of workers. As I said, the cleanup went on, and then Wilfred Bolster. I've got to move along a little faster here, I'm sorry. Here's Wilfred Bolster, the guy whose quote I read to you earlier. Bolster originally, Joseph Pelletier, the DA, presented to a grand jury on a potential charge of manslaughter, but the jury came back and said no, and no one was ever charged with a crime for the collapse. However, this gentleman was appointed by the court to determine whether or not there was a case to go to trial and whether a jury could understand. He was to hear evidence on liability and damages, and that's him there, a decorated American veteran. It was the biggest case in Massachusetts, biggest civil case in Massachusetts history. There were 119 separate legal claims, and they were combined into a single class action. Dudley Dorr became trustee because he owned a couple of buildings that were damaged. The hearings lasted from April 1920 to July 1921 in this mausoleum called the Suffolk County Courthouse that still stands. And when Massachusetts legalized gay marriage back in 2004, the court was sitting in that building. So the case becomes Dorr versus United States Industrial Alcohol. Damon Everett Hall for the plaintiff, that's him on the left, and Charles Francis Choate for the defense. That's add 20 years to Mr. Choate so you get an idea what he looked like. Hall posited that USIA was negligent in the construction. Choate says the tank was bombed. Italian anarchists were active in the North End. This was a valid claim, okay? Italian anarchists were blowing up things all over the East Coast, okay? In fact, one of them bombed a police station in the North End, and another group of anarchists bombed a molasses tank attempted to bomb a molasses tank in Philadelphia, only the bomb didn't go off. In an awful atrocity called the Wall Street bombing occurred about a month after this. 40 people dead, no one ever charged. So Charles Choate makes his case. He calls lots of academic and experts. Factor safety of 3 meant it should have withstood 3 times the maximum pressure. He said it was a bomb. They even built a model tank and bombed it as an experiment. And the tank failed exactly the way the tank in Boston failed. And William Wedger is called by them to describe a bomb big enough for the Boston tank. So Demon Hall at this point flips Walter Wedger. No evidence on the tank parts that high explosive was used. No evidence on the external scene that a high explosive was used. Remember our picture of the windows? No broken windows other than those caused by molasses, and fermentation would increase pressure on the tank. So a defense witness was helping out the plaintiff. Hall built his case. They called a man named, I love the names here, Josephat Blaine on the thickness of the steel. Hammond had admitted earlier that the steel was thinner. It was thin enough to begin with. It was actually thinner, that the thinner steel was delivered. And the same differences for all 6 rings of the tank. Many witnesses complained about leaking and noise, including Isaac Gonzalez. In fact, it got so bad at one point, kids would go around with pails and would scoop up the molasses leaking out of the tank. And the thing that pushed Isaac Gonzalez over the edge was Gell ordered that the tank be painted brown to mask the molasses coming out. Also, ordnance experts nearby in the harbor, that was in the video, heard a sound like rumbling, not like an explosion. The confessions of Arthur P. Gell. Gell was on the stand being deposed in New York City. Talked about the factor of safety. Were plans reviewed by an engineer? No. Was the steel examined? No. Gell complains about delays. Was construction examined during the build? No. Hugh Ogden reviews the transcript, which is devastating for USIA. But the coup de grace, I want you to imagine that man on the right saying, Mr. Goslin, I would like to see you in my office at 4 o'clock to discuss your grades. That man is Charles M. Spofford from MIT. He said the plates were overstrained by static pressure, insufficient number of rivets, joints failed. The pressure should not exceed 16,000 psi. That's pounds per square inch. The absolute maximum, 18,000 psi. The actual pressure in the tank, 31,000 psi. The effective factor of safety was only 1.8. It should have been 3 to 4. He said gas fermentation, not that important. Static pressure was. In other words, just the molasses sitting there. The failure was due entirely to structural weakness. At this point, Ogden changes course. He decides to hear individual cases on damages before deciding on liability. USA objects that this will prejudice his decision on liability. It is a valid objection, but Ogden wants to hear all the evidence. The hearings end. Closing arguments, August to September 1923. Choate, it was a bomb. Hall, the tank was unsafe from the start. He called it a sordid story. 341 days of testimony over 37 months. 920 witnesses. 1,584 exhibits. 25,000 pages of transcripts, which was Palaio's main source. The verdict. After 6 years after the collapse, the judge calls it for the plaintiff. A 51-page report, Arthur Gell is the principal villain. It was only advisory. It could proceed to trial if necessary. Ogden's awards, $300,000 total damages, $5 million today. $25,000 to the city, $42,000 to the railway company. The estates of the deceased, $6,000, about 5 years' salary. Lesser amounts for injuries. No money for the estate of Stephen Clarity, who died in an insane asylum after the accident. Damon Hall objects. He's dissatisfied. Not enough. He insists on a jury trial. Hall and USIA reach a settlement within hours. The cost of defending would have been more than what they had to pay out in damages. The final tab, $628,000, more than double Ogden's number. And one question that remains for me, and if any of you can come up with this answer, I would be delighted to hear it, is why the Hammond Iron Works faced no liability in this incident. They were the ones who built the tank. Epilogue. It was the end of the high-volume molasses trade. Sugar took over. USIA, they sacked 125 workers at the distillery, and the building codes and enforcement stiffened nationwide, including engineering drawings required to be signed and sealed each page. As for Arthur P. Gell, he landed on his feet, you might say. He was promoted to vice president, assistant treasurer in New York City in 1919 and died in 1963 at age 85. The North End today. The North End today is a very valuable piece of property. Those homes I showed you before, the ghetto roofs, all gone. New construction houses there, $2 to $5 million. This is Commercial Street looking east. Okay, that picture was taken from right about here. This is where the tank was. You see that baseball diamond? This is Langone Field, and this is the harbor right here. See boats out here? Under this baseball diamond is the original slab. It is still there. It is buried 20 inches below the surface. And that's the end of my story. I still have the source material I used to put this together, including lots of photographs, and also the complete slide notes from the original Ollie lecture that contain a lot more than I showed you today. Okay, for example, the Sacco and Vanzetti case was a big deal in Boston. When they had the funeral, it was out of the Langone Funeral Home, which was right down the street from the molasses tank, and 200,000 people lined the streets of Boston for that funeral. And this was during the height of the Red Scare. Okay, thank you. I made it. Let me get out of the way here. Oh, somebody lost a ticket.
Oh, it's probably mine. It's not going to be a winner. Thank you, Joe. I'm sure none of us knew as much as we learned today about molasses in Boston. Next month, our program will be presented by Kristen Hess, who is a renowned Raleigh architect. She's also the current chair of the Raleigh Chamber of Commerce. And she will talk about architecture in Raleigh and also the mass transportation proposal that has recently been approved for Raleigh.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Joe. Now we will have our door prizes. Hey, Chris, I'm going to get you to draw out of the red. And the number is 02620. Here we go. Is that Mary Ann? Yeah. You want to carry that to Mary Ann? Right back over there. She's raising her hand. So you're out of the blue. One, 4, 7, 9, 8, 3, 6. Oh, right here. Very good. Thank you. Perfect. That was Mary Ann Gilliam that got that. I don't know your name. All right. Thank you. Thank you guys for attending today. This was my first time, and I'm through with it today. Our next meeting will be February the 9th at 3 o'clock, and I think we have an interesting program for them. See you next week. Next month.